it's such a treat to have these two together on stage, and so we're gonna do a quick conversation about whether there's anything to be hopeful about. um, Jim, your alleged source is being sentenced next week. Somebody else who leaked secrets to his mistress, the CIA director, received his sentence, which was rather light. What is the hope for convincing sources in the future to take these risks?
Well, I can't talk about any specifics of my case, but it just strikes me that it was always clear to me that there was a double standard in the way in which leak investigations have been handled. Going back to when I first started covering the CIA in the 1990s, it was very different. That was an environment in which, when you wrote a story and you broke something the CIA didn't like, they would get all mad and they would say, we're going to have a leak investigation. And it was kind of like Claude Rains in Casablanca. They would say, let's round up the usual suspects. And then you would never hear about it again. And that was kind of, there was like this purposeful ambiguity in the system in which nobody really wanted to go full out on these leak investigations. And so there was like a mutual détente between the press and the government. Then after 9/11, that's all changed. And now there is this aggressive approach to leak investigations that didn't exist for the previous 30 years. And it's because it's just kind of happened over the last few years, seems to be no coherent approach by the government to it. It's whoever, but the one fact that seems to be constantly true is that top officials can get away with things that other people can't. That, some pigs are more equal than others. And that seems to be particularly true in the Obama administration.
Right. Well, that's an unfortunate result, because then that means the only leaks that get leaked are the ones the administration likes.
Yeah, I think the White House, the Obama administration is making, I think the one thing that they've accomplished is to create a very clear pathway for accepted journalism. If you write stories especially on national security, that they like, you won't have any problems. If you write stories they don't like, you will have problems. And it's as simple as that. That is their approach to leak investigations.
Well, okay, we didn't get any hope out of that part of it. Okay, Laura, any hope we can find? Your source is living in exile in Moscow.
I actually think there is some hope. I think that first of all, the work that Jim does and the fight that he's gone through, I think is such an inspiring testament to journalism that we all learn from. I feel that there's hope in a number of things, in the sense of journalism being more adversarial and not sort of taking the government line. This is kind of a hard thing to say as a hopeful thing, but the word torture can now be printed in the New York Times, which is a good thing. But that we're waking up. That the national security argument for why we can't know the truth, I think people are seeing that it's a false argument. And I think we're seeing it, and that people are coming forward, and we're seeing sources willing to take enormous risks, and journalists take enormous risks. And I think that, I think we just have to keep pushing.
One thing I've been thinking about a lot is what is the moral obligation that journalists have towards their sources? Because the standard line that I always heard in any newsroom I was ever in was the lawyers would say to me, there's nothing, right? They hand you this stuff, and I lawyer for my company, I'm going to fight for you, the journalist, all the way, but we're not doing anything for the source. And this was very clear in the, Snowden's fleeing. I'm not aware of the newspapers being involved in that. And I think that's generally a line that traditional media has not wanted to cross. And I wonder if it's time to rethink that in some way. And I have a kind of strangely provocative question for you, Jim, which is that in your book, you go undercover. And one thing I was thinking about, and you may not have thought of it this way, but one thing I was thinking about is maybe undercover is a way to protect sources because you're taking all the risk, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it is the whole issue of what is the, that's why, as I said earlier, it takes more courage to be a whistleblower than it does to be a journalist. And I don't know, I've struggled with that, and I don't know the answer to it. It's a really important question, though, that we should be talking about more. But I don't know right now what to do about it.
I think one of Laura's answers has been to give money to Tails, right? So this is a tool that journalists can use for secure communication. So one possible answer might be newsrooms could invest in better tools and technology to help protect their sources.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do think news organizations have an obligation to provide better digital training to journalists that are working with sources that are at risk. I mean, I think that that's just an obligation to do at this point, and I think that we need to. That should just be the standard. That journalists understand that they're leaving a trail if they're using their real name in talking to sources and using their phones and et cetera. And in terms of Snowden seeking political asylum, I mean, he looked very well at the landscape, and when he made his decision, I mean, he'd seen what had happened to Thomas Drake and William Binney and the NSA-4. I mean, you can't. I mean, how many combined years of service is that? I mean, that's what.
Maybe
67 years, 70 years of service to this country, and they're treated the way that they were. I mean, it's shameful. If you look at that, what chance did he have? So I think that he was also motivated because I think he felt that it was important to have a voice and to stand up and not hide, and to say these things are wrong, these are why they're wrong, and this is who I am.
I do think that ultimately the Obama crackdown on leaks is going to be have a backlash of some kind. I think, in a way, kind of one of the unintended consequences of the leak crackdown is first Manning and Snowden, where if you realize now as a whistleblower, it's going to, you kind of have to, that whatever you do, you're going to be punished for, so you might as well take everything.
Right.
And so it kind of turns, I think it creates so much, it's like putting a lid on a pressure cooker that by the leak investigations that I think the system is going to blow at some point. So
I think also that the days are kind of waning in my mind where the public is willing to believe a story without sort of the documents, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's like a new threshold where people want to see the evidence, right? And so that also changes the equation where maybe you don't have to meet in a garage if you can find a way to secretly slip the documents out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of, reporting issues around encryption and everything I could get into, but that sometimes, encryption can raise a red flag, but, but I agree with Laura, it's something that we have to become more, has to become more commonplace.
One thing that Jane Mayer has said, I think, is that, investigative journalist at the New Yorker, that sources are a little bit drying up because they're worried about the environment. Is that your experience?
Well, it's a kind of a mix. I mean, some people don't want to talk, obviously. Others do. So it's in some ways, the government's case against me was good advertising.
Right.
So it depends,
Right. Laura, and we have to wrap up, but would you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? I think you're working on a Whitney show.
I'm doing a few things. I'm really excited. I'm working at The Intercept, and we're going to start to do more video, so that's very exciting. And because I really believe in visual journalism, and that's what I feel like I can contribute. And yeah, I'm doing some more art-related work where I'm going to, I think, look at similar themes, but in a different way. So.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks to all of the winners.